The science of reading instruction is really quite interesting because a lot of people confuse it with the science of reading, but there really is a difference. While the science of reading tells us a great deal about how children learn to read and how reading develops, the science of reading instruction tells us how to teach children. And so there's a difference. There's a whole body of research on how children learn to read, and that's called the science of reading. But then there's another body of research that will help us understand how to teach reading. Okay, so let me give you some examples. One example is phonics. Well, there's so much research in the science of reading to tell us that phonics is very important for students to learn, all students. But then the question is, well, as a teacher, I know that, but how do I teach it? So to answer that question, we have a whole body of research on the best ways to teach phonics instruction that students will understand. And that body of research tells us that the instruction has to be explicit and the instruction has to be systematic. And what I mean by systematic is you can't just choose one skill in phonics and another to teach at one time, and then another skill at another time and a different skill. It has to be systematic. So that is one example of the difference between the science of reading and the science of reading instruction. I'll give you another example. We know that reading aloud to children is so important to their growth in literacy, but in all ways as well. Well, we've got a large body of research to talk about how important it is to read to children, but there's another body of research that tells us the best way to teach children to read. We have another body of research that says in order to read to children so that the kids get the maximum amount of learning from that reading aloud, the caregiver, the teacher, whoever it is, needs to interact with the child, ask the child questions, have the child ask questions back. So that's an example of how to read aloud to children. We know, and I'm sure that you've heard, a large body of research that talks about the importance of knowledge in reading. The more students know about what they're reading, the better their comprehension. But here's what's interesting. We don't have that much knowledge about how you teach knowledge to children. So it's a little bit different, and it's especially true in the primary grades. We know that it's important, but there are a few studies that can give us an idea of how to build that knowledge, but we don't know definitively in the way that we do know about phonics, for example, and we do know about reading aloud. So there really is a difference between the science of reading and the science of reading instruction. And that difference basically is the difference between learning, how students learn, and teaching, how teachers should teach. What are the best ways, the most effective ways to teach? And the difference is important. We've got lots of research on one, but we also have lots of research on the other. And so hopefully that gives you a better sense of the difference between the two.